Janzoi, Dorjin Janjan, the Lona Rodam, Abamala Juja Gambo Baba Motor Bajavandom, Kajula Mananja, Da Joy, Genius da So Genjina, the Soncheba Mesanga, Dagamalu, the Tamjel. Ludanga Yudam Vesaja, Danan Nazara Damja, Lama Lava, Jesus on Losam Yondin, Jamzung Alaba. Tindri Tunchin Begela, Zora Dagia, Lo, Chuson Rover Sinja Labdo, Zora Chualam, Rover Sinja Labdo, Zora Lam, Truba Sever Sinja Labdos. Truba Yizon Jabra Sinja Labdo, Zora Gangi Tinjan Javan Jong, Gaba me Bachi, me Bachi Pa me Bata, me Ba, me Bandro, me Tade Dumen Tunje me Drubani Jedemba, Zubu Sanje Manam Je, Tampatella Janzar. Jinjin Zaba Lama Juje Kuzon Doje Sinop, Dada Dage Julan Pit. Dage Dambadan Sunjin Yadon Jajin Bondra Brazunja Labdo so. Papa Zambo Juba de la Rabia Chiduk Yubananke, Rabia Yipat Yupacabres. Tene Rabia Yipat de la Simjin la Pimpu Gon Mumba Shibata. Andare de da sekje de rang hengi chungtang chonan jazambar ni song dong harap de shiwarachi dewa dalan ro kungu jing ro tamje lan pembar je shiba tek song yo barwa diga nandong kare re shuba yena da hengi chung sin da heng Jirdan da da bu hin ma da hin da zo chi hin de zo chi hin na dan de da khalo no zang la so ba ge yen ge ja chu je zam yo ba da din nang ge na la de ne da nya wa la dong a cha jang ge dong a yo re ye da la ti kom chi se de to ba kom se de kha ko mar wa ti kom ji dong a yo re den dun ro na na chik la chik sa ba dong a yo re wa Teni Matavina, Jewa, Nawa, Gawa, Lanchewa, Supagudunga. Teni Yada Lada, Yadasi Lamayela, da Tapsu Gudunga. Tela Supagata, Dunga, Dua Recto Botanil, Dunga, so Chiku, Nankazer, the land watch you de Urete in the Nancy Sune, Samala Dunga. Dua Recto Gudunga, Samala Yude Yuba Inza. Di Dunga Taji Hyoraho, Senda Mulanja and Yubare.
So in our prayer for excellent conduct, there are 16 chapters, sections, and now we are come to section number 4, which is the aspiration to bring benefit to sentient beings. And the verse is in the blue prayer book on page 54, the last one, number 4. Throughout all the lands, in all the directions, may I relieve the suffering of the lower realms. May I be able to bring happiness to and provide benefit for all living beings. So it begins with throughout all the lands in all the directions. So all the lands here refers to the various states of existence, pure and impure. And within that, in particular, the impure samsaric states, like the hell realms where the beings experience the suffering of heat and cold, and hungry spirits who experience the suffering of hunger and thirst, and animals experience the suffering of eating each other, and the human beings experience the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness and death, and then the demigods and the jealous gods experience the suffering of constant quarreling and fighting, So basically, each of those 6 realms in samsara has its main suffering, kind of suffering, but all beings in the 6 realms, in all of samsara, suffer. So this is a prayer to liberate them from suffering.
다 현기 중의 체의 간다ben jarke yori hubayina 다 체미이네 벤 잠바 체미 그 같이 챕터바 대장 그중 디니 닌지 체미 그 같이 챕터바 대장 중 데니 가와 체미 그 같이 챕터바 대장 중 데니 단형 체미 그 같이 챕터바 대장 중스다 체 데니 jar고 요래 다 가자 수수그 롤 저도 용바이나 아초 파체다 닌지 체미게 잠바다 닌지 체미게 찹체데 산제다 장초순 발을 뜨는 아주 찹체데 중종 작을 요래데 단춤 체미데 찹치한다고 요래 디 단춤 체미데 디 짐생을 때는 아주 체미야 고름 때서 만다와 인조 그 요래 가레 단현 체미 다 냠니지데 파트롤 훈로 요로와 자파트롤 군산라메 샬롱 디나운투소니 데네 단현 체미데 훈노 소용 그 요래 데르 줌신 쳔보 요래 데ン단현 체미 기바데다 이제 다 심진 탐제 파마 답을 람상처 두히고 마타나양 제 라다니 스네 대상 그 이와 미데완
So this term throughout actually here. Just adjusting my microphone. Huh? Ich kenn's auch. Something is funny with my microphone. I don't know what exactly. So anyways, this term through. Can I say something?
So 좀 알레테 되게 지고 양고살라.
지고 야 띵거나래요.
지고
Maybe that's what it is. So this term throughout here in the Tibetan, it implies that it's kind of like a measurement. So the measurement of how far something pervades or goes. So now here we're speaking about the 4 immeasurables, and so how far it goes. So for example, if one cultivates immeasurable love, then the more vast one's mind, this is how far it goes. And so the same is the stronger one's compassion. Basically, the more it pervades. And the same is with rejoicing and with equanimity, the 4 immeasurables. And so now when we apply that to our own mind, if we would compare our love and compassion and the pervasiveness of our love and compassion to that of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, then ours would be quite small. But actually, it's for us, from our perspective, more likely that we first develop this all-pervasive or immeasurable equanimity. It might be easier for us to pervade that first. So generally, when we speak about the 4 immeasurables, sometimes different orders are given as to what is developed first of those 4. But Batu Rinpoche said in the words of my perfect teacher that one actually first cultivates immeasurable equanimity. And there is a really important reason for that, and that is because if we would cultivate love first, then that would mean we have to see all sentient beings as our parents. And even if we are maybe not able to do that right away, what we can do is at least see no difference between them. So there is no difference between enemies and friends. So therefore, one first cultivates this immeasurable or all-pervasive equanimity.
다 심진 탐제 그 동화 세대 다 동화 솜는 만두바 미바라와 Donghe ke donghe se do ngel shiba kareri se du kantar sem lu sem tamje tla nyangi ji ba yi de mong ba teni de tabe ji cha de yore den da donga ke donga shiban de ne teni perna je ta ndra yong da ga khel je je da karel la gora 소소 그 조본도 이동 하전 참부 그 조본도 제 달로 종송아이나 양 디지라 양 데이터브 인라 제 드나 종용 말씀으로 때때다로 소변소 망리들라 데이터 자다 데네 단 주로 동아 시반데네 데네 ngaran sola 제 대완 침부 요나야 데 동아를 전 저로 용거 요래 sakche ji dewa seva mayo satana ra cha da yore ne tambo dewan chimpo yo deba de jin dong ha chon jo yong wa nari deni da chapan de ji dong ha siban de dong ha tamji ge yang zo ra cha da yore da di chapan de ji dong ha de darang arang zo ge pa ya lam be zung ji gwa ina deni da hiraji parade simba 냠린 좁토네 난고 요리 마도게 인다게 드니 테크님보 문이라고 지토야 깔 카보 차가 요리 이나 테스트에서 미바 지토고 요리 대인상 테니 차반도지 동아데 ngasoke 다란 통토고 요마리 베나 락바 그낭나 라빠는 뻗지 요나 메게 때나 마도 락바 크랑라 대장 초와 때기 요마라와 대답을 이나 지망을 줘야 냠도바 컴퍼런로디 데니 ngaranzo make nana paje yona lamsa ha kogro chora choaje ra tinai 데니 chapan ju dongha de dongha ha changke hinang chawoji yamba ha ko 데니 de pa ya la zumba de na yong yore
And so in general, although beings experience all kinds of suffering, there is really no suffering which is not included within one of three kinds of sufferings. So there is basically three kinds of sufferings for sentient beings. And the first one is called the suffering of suffering, or the suffering upon suffering. And so first of all, something difficult happens, something that is unpleasant for your body or your mind, unwanted. Or, for example, suffering on top of suffering then means that, so you, for example, there's a friend that you have cared for very much, and that person died this year. And then, right after that, another person that you care for dies. So it's like one thing after the other, the suffering upon suffering. The second kind is called the suffering of change. And so first we experience some slight happiness, and then that changes into suffering. And that's the case for most of our kind of pleasurable experiences. First it is nice, and then it changes and it turns into suffering. So it's the suffering of change. And then the third one is the all-pervasive suffering, and that's the most important one, the principal kind of suffering. And so in order to get rid of this all-pervasive suffering, one has to mainly develop through practice the perfection of wisdom. And there's really no other method that will remedy the all-pervasive suffering. We might find some slight and temporary relief from other methods, but not lasting relief. So we need to really see what it is, what this pervasive suffering is. And so it is not something that we can see like that. It's not so obvious. For example, it's like a strand of hair in the palm of your hand. It's so fine that you actually don't really feel it. You don't feel the hair lying on your hand. So later, when your practice increases, when your experience increases, it is like taking this strand of hair and putting it into your eye. So then you will feel it. So it's just like that. And then when you see it, when you see this all-pervasive suffering that you haven't seen before, you realize that this is something extremely like difficult and frightening. And therefore you will do anything to abandon this all-pervasive suffering.
다 심지 장 메바지 요데바리 테네 텔레투바게 심지 리레라다 데타 동하 숨보 가롱게 아 테네 나나마 추바지 요마레 데엔데다 조치휴 나란소 로도 남기도서 곰데야 장그 고니 테네 다텔레 페당 장다 만보직 돈의 곰야 요르데 조 장그 돈의 선 담아이나 테네 심지 리레가 동하 응네자네다 다랑 어랑 좀 좋아 매 나니야 추 냠리 진의 동킹 마체자 단다게 제와 zam보지 랑데 요바르와 테네다 제 추드야 그 까와미 바 고가미 바 란더 미히케 도솔 선 담아이나 저 라왕 미바 테네 닌지 제고야 라왕 미바 잠베 셈 제고야 너 치차 용고 요래 데 차용와데 가니리스나 나란초 동하데 희고요레 드니 용고요레 산제 좀 된데가 담보 동하를 희바라자 송 하남 책 대치보 송용레 담보 대치보라드니 곰 용고요라 곰네 동하를 희바라자 시바텔 드니 콩글로마 탐미고 곰 잠나 곰은데 티리티기 냠용데 탐네 다 동할 시발 동할 하고요. 자. 대니 동하 하고인데 대니 군종 방와를 자 소용 바로 산이. 군종 시드 다 동하 탐지 되는 용사가 있는데 될 군종 dimba 이게 중거대 거드 랍산 dimba 이게 빠다다다 제마 송이가 와 노마레 dim바레 송된 때는 다 koronga de zambut sokarimji gomne tene yang tsatrawatli je gomdna chena tene phalang mo de se somba chanjang rewa.
And even though there are limitless sentient beings, they all experience their own suffering, which belongs to those three kinds of sufferings. So there, it doesn't matter which sentient being it is. There's no one who does not experience suffering. And therefore, in the beginning, so we have to reflect on what we call the four thoughts that turn the mind, and that can be practiced by contemplating various different things. For example, we can think about different examples, or we can think about the magnitude of suffering and so forth. So especially when we think about the magnitude of suffering of each sentient being, it becomes clear. For example, even if we are born a human being, now we are born as a human being and we have also encountered the Dharma teachings, and still sometimes we do not have the fortune or the opportunity to practice the Dharma, or we do not really understand what we should do and what we should not do. And then when we think about the magnitude of suffering of beings, then we really can't help but cultivate compassion for that and kindness toward those beings. So the Buddha, when the Buddha first gave teachings, the first thing he said was, you must understand suffering. And actually, in the beginning, this is all he said. He only said that, and then his disciples would meditate on that. You have to recognize, understand suffering. So then the disciples meditated on that, and they gained an experience, and they understood suffering. And then once they have understood suffering, then the Buddha gave the next teaching, and he said, now once you have understood suffering, next you must abandon the origin of suffering, the source of all suffering. So in this way, the Buddha gave the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, not like now, and he didn't give them all at once, but step by step. So first he taught his assembly of 5 fortunate disciples that first truth, one truth, and then they would practice that, and they would ask questions and meditate on that, and then they would actualize it, realize it, and then the next step would be given.
Teni ta that's God. Dewa talan. Ta de teni soso ngene ta de ta beche donga kanar de simjin tamji ta dewa la. Te goge yin se soso ngene ya de ta be simhyuk ta simji chimbo yo goba ta de ta nyam de la teni molam jane ta zambalen de gala jancho samba 망부지 페비오를 바래와 되는 장초 선바 탐지게 가시게 레 딱복게 제와 이네 라마게비히니 라소바게 제와 이네 로동싱게 요바래 가시게 마다베 제와 이네 라다당 되는 라제당 게 심지 되는 가시에는 되는 베다 심지 베나 체당 힘면 네바 네잖아 다라는 것도 동 그도디 현대블롱의 채트서 네바 다미 대소는 난 그게 체크해게 랑잉그 알아서지 닌제의 랑잉그 제 닌제로 제지도 너서 뭐 저거 장초 선바 탐제게 대 인을 핀토를 이렇게 치도양 체라서 보게 제와 이는 다 체자요나 체자드는 체제정 그 제와리는 되니 코랑게 지디게 교부가 남저단 단라제 드라 혁진보 등원데 텔레티네 되니 나랑소 닌제제 나랑소 그 닌제되게 되니 체 인다다 고주고 고보 참아라 핀토야 요로 텔라소 바 장초 선바 시지데 제완라 문라 이게 요래 되니 타나제 맨송마 순주게 제와 이네 산제 근제나도 선나 요래다 다다바베나 제와 이용 거 나랑소 그 남주 단라제 데비드 심진냠다 조 통데 다 니지 제고래 니지 제 마탐나양 되는 냠다부터 심진 탐제 장조 심비와 인주리 삼나 되는 거네 잔디 삼나도 노려 말어 되네 나랑서 아직 레노 간간자 다네 지용 그 요지리도 소per나 저세 토미케 장방 공부 되네 지바나 인리 다 드나노 차데요리스
So then here we're making a prayer. I'm going to bring all sentient beings to happiness and freedom from suffering. All the sentient beings who are tormented by suffering. So here when we make this prayer, we develop courage and determination, okay, mental strength of wanting to do that. And so in this world, for example, in this world, there are many different bodhisattvas, and they appear in various forms. There are some bodhisattvas who take birth to benefit those with more pure karmas. For example, they appear then as the spiritual masters, the teachers who benefit the people. And then there is other bodhisattvas who take birth in the more impure worlds, like the world of the animals, like wild animals and so on. Or, for example, there are stray cats and dogs that also are sick. So there are these advertisements asking for donations for these orphaned cats and dogs. And when we see that, how neglected and kind of afraid they look, when we see that the advertisement, then we can't really help but cultivate compassion for them. So it is possible that a bodhisattva has taken birth as one of those dogs, these orphan dogs, in order to benefit others. For example, if there are 100 orphan dogs and one of them is a bodhisattva, and then that bodhisattva maybe looks particularly neglected and emaciated, then when we see that on the advertisement, then we feel compassion. And in that way, the other 99 dogs who are not bodhisattvas are benefited, because then people have compassion for all of these dogs. And so bodhisattvas appear in so many different ways. Even in the stories of the Buddha, for example, sometimes they appear as prostitutes and so on, or as pitiful beings, like destitute beings that just urge us to cultivate compassion for them. And even if this compassion doesn't arise right away, we can still think that that dog, for example, or this really impoverished sentient being, that could be a bodhisattva. So we can think that. And if we think that way, then we are also probably not mistaken. And then once we have purified our karma, we will eventually see that they are bodhisattvas. For example, as was the case with a Sangha who practiced Maitreya Buddha, and finally, after a long time, directly beheld the face of Maitreya.
Jiktin di nani chertang kon sob juram nani ya yongware ta kandawa yongrisina sem zangbo hiba tene yongware namju sems na yandela sem zangbo hiba ndela goa je yuna dela papa choa je yusare samso namju sem zangbo de o je ma sem zang jinjiri sidu je de ma ya bo ndo je ta choa de zamma do de ze je hem do Tanda when rehi de so mambo nji ta sunchu de so mambo hyanda wendu ta kawando sem zambo hibala tsek de langa drewa ni ja jundo ji gaksho ndawo jine pasana tondu yin la pin ma to jang pin ma to rong nu meji se ti de semba zambo jik de di semba zambo tsek de semba zambo nange 제 마휴라고 차대 요래 제 마보래 저당 제 마보 제 마보 근데 인라 피마도나 누미지 세소 다 인라 누미지 왜디 강라 인라 핀다기 세두 다 셈바잠보 첸 토보 차대 요래 다디 난동 히베도는 어쩌랑 심상지 인지리 세두 책 첨부 휴지 돈을 깨자 문에 책 랍침보 돈을 깨자대 here yung yo bando read yore the solve tone cha de yores ta tin du nga chu teni ti sem zambo te ko yang chalong ro jong ne ya chalong chung du teni gare cha yung gorisna ta jan chok sem yin pin jan chok sem hi ba de cha ge yoro ba
So when we speak about cultivating love and compassion, so this is really a dharma, a term, but actually we shouldn't just see it that way, because love and compassion also really arises, is something that we are familiar with also in a world, in our worldly ordinary lives. So it arises, love and compassion arises from a good heart. And So normally when we think about somebody who has a good heart, then maybe we don't really get like a real feeling of what that really actually implies. But when we say somebody has a good heart, then so about that there is a lot of things that can be explained and taught actually, but it's not just like a normal like feeling of he's just like a good person or so. But basically, such a good heart, being a good person, can be explained in two different ways. And one is the first one is more from a negating perspective, and one is more from an affirming perspective. The first one, from the negating perspective, is that, so there's a double negation here, which is a commitment to, if I cannot benefit sentient beings, then at least I will not harm them. So that is one kind of commitment to not harm beings, basically. And then the second one, which is more affirming, is not only will I not harm others, but on top of that, I'm going to actually benefit them as much as I can. And that kind of good-heartedness is of the more advanced level, the first one of a more inferior level. And so therefore, it's actually a concept that carries a lot of weight. If somebody says, oh, you have a really good heart, it actually really means a lot. It's actually a very powerful term, if you really understand what that means. And so then understanding that, we train in having a good heart, and as that training develops, it develops eventually into a mind of real altruism and bodhichitta.
Jadang namju la go yore de samba zang na satan lam yang zang samba ngi na satan lam yang ngi tamji samba ta la ra le be so da ngarang zo jadang je satan lam shi ban de gwa ni yor ba ji ting to ne satan lam se wan de gandar rosa ka lam inare desa ka sa inare namjun sosu nyere kun chowak danje la jawa lamro yongmin do so samba zang la ra le de yubare so di tsai do so pe dabo ja ko ju garchim bo cha de yore ngaran so namju rumro mambo ji ge yore ta rumro yak de so cha yong go samba zambo ji jun de so ka lam ne dene sa ta lam ya zang se dene di kala tini ta rumro la suba yinda drondu tini yar ndogo yorwa tini dan di samba zangbo hiba di samba zang sadalaya zang hiba de da nga chu kan samjang yang de ra yong ge ka che sem zangbo je yabo ju ba yarab je na yang ji mandu pe jin par chin the de wan ro yore dan de yang le sang ro yore ngaron su le je wa nga ma tang che tu la su ba le chap chin ngin ba chap chin sa yo na de ta tar sam ba zang bo to ge jang de de ni je wa sama la je de wa ji xin kan ro je la ro cho cho ro zo yong ge yo ro wa di jim sin la de ne o sam ba zang bo je ni de sa dan la ya ge zang ma song de la tin ya yo ma re si.
So normally when we speak about having a good heart, in the Dharma it is said that if one has a good heart, then one's like place and path will become excellent. And if one doesn't have a good heart, if one has a negative intention, then also one's place and path will become negative. Everything depends on one's state of mind, one's motivation. And so there's two ways of understanding place and path. So in a worldly sense, it's place and path. In a Dharma sense, is the stages or the bhumis and the paths. And so in a mundane sense, it refers to the place where we live, and the paths are the roads where we go. And so basically, in this ordinary life, the success of what means much to us, such as the well-being of our families and friends and so on, all depends really on a good motivation. And it's really important to hold on to these words, because often when we want to bring about success, we do all kinds of ceremonies or pujas. And actually, having a good heart is the best puja or ritual one can do. And of course, on top of that, one can do other services, different pujas to make it even better. But really, everything depends ultimately on this motivation. And then, you might think that sometimes it happens that no matter how good is your heart, no matter how well-mannered you are, you still often run into things that you don't want to. You have to deal with things that are undesirable, and you run into different obstacles. When that happens, it is because of karma that has to be purified. It's either a karma that was accumulated in a previous life, or maybe something that we did in the earlier parts of our lives. And if that karma is very powerful, then it will ripen now, and through the power of your good heart becomes purified. And if it becomes purified now in this life, then in the future life, you are ready to go to the Pure Land, like the Pure Land of Dewa Chen. So therefore, don't think that now if the heart is good, the path is good, but my path is not so good. So don't think like that.
Tara samba zambo hibande tashi gang hiba nang yinge de nangba ke chun na chern de ge yori ma to nangba chun pa de mix kan satu je na song yo ba marin de samba zambo hiba nangba ji bo mari chulok su ji ke satu sin zu yo ba marin de ngarang zun ruwa mi nang ni de ni ya te zo go yarab zangju hiba tin nang de ni ya ko chalong ro jong ni lekcha je re lekzang je junsin tel de na ngarang zun ne wen da di Samba zana sadan layang zang, samba ngi na sadan lamyang ngi. Tamji samba dala ra lebe, dewe, samba zana nindin ji, sebe tsik jingdoa. Dengu newe na ngarang su namjun, di modak langa dang, roncher chimbo nang tu sulu tenra chi, chabrang do chimbo chi jardoa. Di nang yiwe, enra ngune pa jor na jartam na, pinto chimbo yori samso, ta chabrang jardoa. Tang chabra no de che ti zota be tin da ho ben jartam mo mambo ke sen to la cha zo yarab zang chu ke pakcha chen bo ji yo to ko yoro wa ma so ke ma chi sanje ke lam la yan thi ma ta na che yarab zang chu la chur jor ta ba na de le don chen bo jen rom ro yore yang de so che de so ye de so jar sa de so che jakap tang sane ke them tang twin be to ne de ji go yor ma so yang nga zu simba zang bo yin se them dang de so ma zi ne ya bo yo ma de so ze go yo ra so so ka ba de na de ke them de so zu song ji ju de gu yap ji ke yo re jakap de la de jun se ne de na jakap de la gu yap so so ke ji je ba yin na de so so la de ji to go ro wa ngene ta ne de ne den da yin zang nga zu ke ji de so jing yin da wo je kern de yin dang gen kern do ma do che yo ma re de da nga zu de sa ha go yong de ne so so ne 다 힘바지 그 저랑 띵기인데 저랑도 요래 세네 라비고사 제라고 말와 되네 다 소소를 적 적진로 얻나 용기나 어때다 비치도네 야보 요래 있어 제지 첨부 찬로레스
So even though speaking about this, a good heart is something that belongs to the Buddhist teachings, it is also not something that the Buddha had invented. It's something that's just kind of natural actually to our society, and no religion really has invented that concept. But even in a normal worldly society, it is important to be well-mannered and respectful and positive in one's conduct. So it is good to hold on to the good qualities of conduct in our societies. So again, this quote from before says that if your intention is good, your path will be good, and if it is bad, your path will be negative, and therefore make an effort to cultivate a good intention. So sometimes when we go in a big city, for example, there, like on the highway, there are these signs advertising like quotes of like inspiration, maybe encouraging us to develop a good heart. And if we see these, the purposes of these signs is that it can place a really positive imprint into our mind. And even though we might not attain enlightenment right away, but at least we turn into a good-hearted, good person, and that already accomplishes something really meaningful. And of course, while doing that, it's also important that wherever you are, in whichever country you are, you also follow the laws of that country. Because we cannot say that I have a good heart, so I will do what I think is right, but which means I will not follow the law. So we shouldn't do that because it is just kind of out of respect for the place where you're at or the country you live in, that just out of respect, you would respect the laws of that place. And actually, if you respect that, then naturally you will also feel much more happy. And so that is really one responsibility that we just kind of naturally have. And so if we have no other things that we can do, if we just do that and take up that responsibility, then it really will be something that will lead to a lot of greatness later on.
Ai, that the order the ne ravi ngapa tere. The gochu gun mumba sta gocha shiba de damja no de yoro dan de kare sungdo. Janchup juba yongs zozi jing simjin dag udan tunparan jo. Zambo juba da ne rab tunjing mangkarba kundu juba jors. Dan de kapsu hyoloka dambo te ke kare sungo yori sedu. Dene soso ngone yang parar de simba draw. Zor jeba ke dene da namasanji bichun janchun chok ju sumje zabdun sen da yuwa da taso tsama sem ke tinghi larang la tine dene de samba zambo jowa lekpo juba ya bo taso tamje rekhe ja yuwa da di ke zozi jen hiba de soso la dambo tsama yubar jeba dere 삼볼 소소를 때 야보요네 대 야보요바데 심 지강이 바디 값서 심진 그 강왕던 튼거요레스 튼거요레스 튼히바데 양데 가르소 추바라데 좀 요거 요르단 직tin의 튼 미히바가 좀 직tin 수공다 대 감다 왕보 삼바라 튼 미히바 대 페능안다고 지난데 띵데 좀 첨보요르다 가래 요르시드 내가 추지해 이렇게 답자 자해 여러다 된 이렇게 자는데 되니 카헬 때문에 제 심나나 핑핑이라고 제 차크요나 카헬랑 삼바게 책무진다고 하고 뭐리나야 이때라 파트너 랍디와이나 양 가망다 뚜마시바 차송하러와 맞소 남지 추히에 히데바 치보 그 팽마다 왕네라는 이제 심 대교 산제게 심진게 감다 왕보다 무바도 르뜨는 송용거 여러와 tere da ju dan tuen paran jo si dun ju dun tuen dene delan jo chardu ta tambo
And then next we come to the fifth chapter, which is an aspiration for steadfastness, and that is like a vow, a commitment. And it's on page 55 in the Blue Prayer Book, verse number 5. Fully accomplishing the activities of enlightenment, may I work in harmony with the needs of all beings, may I practice and demonstrate the deeds of Samantabhadra through all future aeons. So the first line here, so it's 4 lines in Tibetan, and the first line is fully accomplishing the activities of enlightenment. So the activities of enlightenment, these activities mainly refer to the practice of the 6 paramitas, and then also there are the 37 factors or aspects that are conducive to enlightenment, to awakening. So with mindfulness, one practices them all, and with mindfulness, one sustains good intention and excellent conduct. So fully accomplishing means to Zog se na te drop marwa, na
Zol kwa mambo yer, da kap de zo so so yu bu tong ra.
drop de na mara accomplish de mara.
Dan ma yo sala accomplish tong re.
Ina ti
Ta da te lan de do. So so rang kung ni nyam.
Ai se na ti kheba chemo do. Yo ba ta ni dropa.
Da de kin.
Kare to.
Yong su zo ba.
Yo ba ra. Dropa ra. Accomplishing. So one must accomplish these practices of 6 paramitas, and with mindfulness, all these excellent practices. And then may I work in harmony with the needs of all beings. So to be in harmony with the activities of other sentient beings. And that's often maybe a fault that, especially as Dharma practitioners, we have, that we don't really know how to really be in harmony, to be in accordance with the great diversity of characters and mental capacities and so forth of different people. For example, I myself also have that fault. For example, when I give Dharma teachings, then maybe for some people, it actually will become like beneficial medicine for their mind. But then maybe for some others, they might not really understand or something, or it won't really benefit them. And it's because it doesn't really agree with their disposition, maybe with their state of mind or character. And so then, therefore, even just teaching the Dharma on its own is maybe of not benefit in itself. One also has to know how to be in harmony with anyone's state of mind. And that is why the Buddha had taught in such a way that it benefits, is in harmony with the various kinds of mental capacities and characters of different sentient beings.
Teni da ti tsigang sumba ti kap su zambo juba ta ne raptu jing hiwan de ti tsek de ne ba chimbo re. Te kares na ta zambo juba sidi ta zangju ta kantar duni lamzang songdo an ten rewa nan ti na yi je randon zambo. Randon la yang teni tara de drubya la yang zambo yinba. Yindun drubya la yang zambo yinba. Tene deta raptu jing sidi ta zambo ku juba yarab zangju tene chuden tunba ku juba nde raptu tung sidi ta hindu sidi da hajam ke tengsa bori dele jang tene tengsa rudu raptu shiba de yungu yorba. Tene tung jing sidi ta deta duda naba kundu tung jing sidi ta zambo juba ke dambi chu chung kolo duda naba kundu gorgori shiba tung rawa cha de yori tena na. Lin jik zang yang ten jik zang ma yin ba. Tani tuta naba gundu gorgo yori sebu dong cha do yobare. Tani tul deyang jik tsin de zang la jik gor nuwa zang jik darong chokbar menzin ba maung karba gundu sta karba zidu kare re. Lorab tsege yomarwa. Durab zang ke tsege yomarwa. Ta karba zidu tani ta tsin tohyu tala ya zangga nang ke tsin tohyu tala ya ro yor. Ta karpa deyang gundus, ta gundus iba deyang tsegibe nomba chimbore. De gundus de duda namba gund, bar ma cheba. Ta deta ba de gundus zambo juba, pa tin, rang lop, deni yin tamje diga lamla, njukbar hyo, yin ge deta ba tinbar hyo la so batone. Tene sunga yo bares.
Then the next line in that verse is, then may I practice and demonstrate the deeds of Samantabhadra. And so now this commentary is called the commentary that elucidates the excellent path that accomplishes the twofold purpose. And twofold purpose is that it accomplishes the excellent conduct for one's own purpose and also for the purpose of others. And so this word here, so may I demonstrate, may I fully or perfectly demonstrate. May I perfectly demonstrate the deeds of Samantabhadra. So this perfectly is again a term that is magnified. It makes things very strong. So it's a very profound way of demonstrating, meaning at all times, like relentless demonstrating of excellent conduct. The deeds of Samantabhadra, which refers to basically turning the wheel of Dharma, teaching the Dharma at all times. So may I demonstrate the deeds of Samantabhadra, may I demonstrate the deeds of excellent conduct, and then through all future aeons, in terms of timing. So it's not just one time or a few times, but at all times. And it's not just in this life, but for all future aeons. And an aeon or a kalpa is the longest measurement of time. So it's longer, obviously, than years or even generations or centuries. It's the longest measurement of time is a kalpa. And then, so for kalpas, for future kalpas, and all here refers to at all times and in all future kalpas. And this is also a very powerful term because it's continuously, all the time. I will train in the excellent conduct, and I will cause others to train in excellent conduct so that also others will demonstrate the excellent conduct.
Ta dere de yindong drondu tene zambo ju bakalamne yindo dudu zo soso ke semte jancho seng ke ngobu tolo jorgo yore ta jancho seng ke ngobu tolo jorndu tela namba ni zamche tonu hyo yo bare dan namba ni de gares na jarpo ta simji song tene dambo nga ta taye be magin roare drupo ndso ke donda ta sangje ge yin si ta ngobo ba me ta cha song arwa japo ta simji se de ke donda nga thomar sangje teni ngek ta ta sola pimba da dewa dugin samba de la japo ta simji se de ta lamni yang teni yindo dubji yo pare teni yang zo ta simji song zo ta se tang dambo taye be simji tamje tarpa langla ku tarpa ne hiwa nyangde ke langla ya ku teni yene ngarang sangje gi samne ta teni deta bedu dela zo ta simji sta zo se de choran sun ropa ina ha ko yorwa nga sipo ha ko yo ngarang ropa re te jum sem de lok tang ya tu so tambo ya kurang su desana ya chi teni goja ra chi go yorwa ma to ngarang tambo a lok tang ya de so desan kamba na huna ya ro so na de kurang su ji ne ya yong go yo ma na chi yang chet de yong do chet da hime de so yong do a semji kurang su na ma da do de ha go go ngarang su semji yin ge dong de dang dang chet de hime ge dong de dang de so ha go go do antique chepa ha go go do zhe mo da zhen de chepa da cha me ha go go ya da bu nang le yan zu su ne je ji ji le yong ba sim ji yin ba yang跟ka xie yong ma dabu ka yatsin gora te na yin simji yang chama jabo ta simji ji bo je de na yang ka he ji su labro chi mar ba simji tam te la do gora korons la de nyen je sa de wa ji xin kan ya
So in order to accomplish the benefit of others, we first have to change our mind into a mind of bodhichitta. And there are two main ways to cultivate bodhichitta. First one is called the king-like bodhichitta, and that is where one sees oneself like a king. So thinking that, for example, I am going to first attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, all mother sentient beings. I will first attain enlightenment, and then I will help them. For example, this is the intention of the Buddha Amitabha. So you first attain enlightenment, and then you benefit beings. And then the second kind of bodhicitta is the shepherd-like bodhicitta, which is where you think, first, I am going to bring all limitless sentient beings to the path of liberation, and then I'm going to establish them in the peaceful state of nirvana, and only then will I attain enlightenment. So this is just like a shepherd who goes last. So maybe if you are nomad, then you would know about that. For example, I am a nomad from before in Tibet, so it's very clear to me. So when you are herding sheep and yaks, then you have to go last. So you have to make them go home, and then you close the door. If you go home first, they will probably not come home. So there is different animals, maybe a cat and a dog will still come home even if you go first. But then other animals, like herd animals, they might not come home if you go first. So therefore you go first, make sure that they're all home, and then you close the door. So that's the shepherd-like bodhicitta. And because there's all kinds of different sentient beings, people like to cultivate bodhicitta in different ways. So if we would make it like a rule, everyone has to cultivate the king-like bodhicitta, then maybe there will be some who will not want to train in bodhicitta at all. And then they will be left behind in samsara, and then we might look at them with pity from the Pure Land of Devachan.
Tane da Rabia Trukpa de Karpa Nyambe Chanchup Sambatan Trebu Gun Mumba Shibaterwa Antela Dagi Judang Tsungbar Gang Juba de Da Dan Da Dun Rokbar Hyo Ludangana Dan Simji Jang Juba Da the Mulam Jik Ye Sumbandere Dan Dege Tsigang Dambo Dege Gareting Yorishuna da dax da ngarang so so ke da zambu ku juba da yorwa zambu ku juba de da chongba ku juba gang je ba tham je mare da so ku zambu juba yarab zambu juba da zambu juba ku juba de dang chongbar jungkin tham je de rang dan ro ne 대양 저 로는 시대다 냠도 초안라고 냠도 로네 대양 제 갑갑 사마이 바두다 나바군다 드네 냠도 로주요 봐 다용 효시 로네 가르제레 드네 램지 등다 베는 아랑 그 줄라스 아랑 수대다 간사소에나 장부주바 냠네 진키 아랑 그 줄라 르당 아당 다 이라 소버고니 드네 Zambu Kuchuba, Zambu Lela, ta zumba gang yorwa tene de da jig dun tunba tene yin tamje ga jubar hyo se de songo yobare.
Then we come to chapter number 6, which is the aspiration to encounter bodhisattvas, to associate with bodhisattvas for many aeons. To have the fortune to encounter many bodhisattvas. And so then in the prayer, that's page 52, verse number 6, may I always associate with those whose activities are similar to mine. May we act alike in thought, word, and deed, and may our aspirations be as one. So in the Tibetan, the first line is, here the second line, those whose activities are similar to mine or associate with those. So the activities here, it refers to the excellent conduct. So may I always associate with those, or kind of be surrounded by those individuals whose activities are similar to mine, so whose activities also are excellent conduct. And not just sometimes, but all the time. So therefore it says, may I always, which is the second line. And then the third line is, may we act alike in thought, word, and deed. So may my own excellent conduct of body, speech, and mind be reflected in the conduct of all others. And in this way, being of similar conduct, may all of our aspirations be as one.
Ta den ge zo dere da ngarang zu yarab zamju jin tamche chon zom yong ba yana dene de la top da nu ba che bar wa ji yo ba res. Ta den du so so ge zho po so so wa ji yarab zamju da dara zambo ju ba mo la na kun du zambo ju ba la hyung gen ji yin du de yin du yin tam ji ti ju ba la hyo yong. Ta de hyong du ju ba da wo cha ge ta de na ne yang na si su so so la pe na 제 다 가르라고 제 소소라 든바 만다와다 짤 만다와다 누바 만다와 요디 데네 데 핀순지기 제글라 구yap지 더바 핀순지기 제글라 당린지네 데네 롭종지 더바 데네 조데 지수이랑 돈의 연구요로 지수이랑 제네 데네 단다지 용와제 효스다 몰란자게 다티 몰란데 간다 다 ngaso pechawa kejanro hibaina cheme droba 남중 알아서 다 신뢰했던 튼바자 드나로 오지 차도 요랬대 차 너무도 알아서 그 용화 그 직선은 상호지 땅 소소로 저 같이 튼보 이거바이나 륜튼 튼데 륜냠드 네메네 라스 줄바지 저가라고로 따완 튼먼튼 뒤타는 연구 요래 따완 튼먼튼 세완데 다와 때서 만다와 요 초바이나야 디토는 소소게제 핀순적이지라 그야 제나 드라빈도 따와시데 다랑에 남바 산제바게 여럽 잠주게 따와데라고 요로와 군두잠부 주버게 따와데라고 요로와 다 데다베제 람니팅 가란소 핀순 지수여랑와 제네 드라지디드니 단데 제 힘감다고 제 차로 요래 danda ke pena longba chigla den longba korang lan chamthun yabo yo dene chen ta sola ne na chang dawa chemi danda dawa ji nan ne dene longba de kan da hin kan dawa cha de yo barwa dene de inza ta daran din suma na ne dawa chi cha de yo res.
So if a group of people comes together and they all are of excellent conduct and well-mannered, then if one is surrounded by just those kind of people, then such an assembly becomes really very unique and powerful. And we influence each other. For example, if your friend, so if you are of excellent conduct, you practice the excellent conduct of Samantabhadra, then also your friend will practice it. And then if you practice it and your friend, then others will also begin to practice it. So then everyone's conduct becomes excellent and in harmony. Even though, of course, we are not the same, we might have different aspirations, different states of mind and capacities and so forth. But despite these slight differences, if one possesses excellent conduct, one is able to respect one another for each other's differences. One is able to accept different viewpoints and opinions about things. And actually, all of this acceptance and tolerance comes really from this excellent conduct of rejoicing. So if we, from the perspective of the scriptures and those who study the scriptures, there's this term which is called something that is valid will be accomplished, something will be authentically accomplished. And that is even in agreement with science, actually. If you really think about a personal experience of how things go, when, for example, there is a group of friends and you are harmonious, you're getting along, that what really determines this harmony in between companions or friends has not so much to do with physical closeness or distance, but it has to do with being of a similar kind of view, a similar viewpoint. This is really what determines that. So it's more the mind that determines that. And of course, even though we are of similar view, it's also okay that we do not have exactly the same viewpoint on things, that there are slight differences. But if we possess excellent conduct, we will be able to respect the differences in each other. And so, especially as according to the Buddhist view, that is how we practice excellent conduct, and that is what is meant with being well-mannered, or this conduct of Samantabhadra. It is to really rejoice in each other's differences. And then if we are able to do that, then wherever we are at, that place becomes like a pure land. For example, if a country is at peace and people live in harmony and there is no disease and so on, then that country itself already has become like a pure land.
다드니 라비에 듬바데리 다 듬바데 게비히니 니퍼시부곤 몬바시바데리 데데드 다텔라 달라 핀바른두 포트로포 다 잠보 주바랍트 tum바남 데다 타야 타든 체바르효 데다 다게 노이 메용서 단디캅스 드니 달라 핀바른두 포트로포 히바데 jirtang ke che dropo zamayen ba dan de sosolong ne pimbar do dropo te gewhini cha de yobare so te ke gewhini de pimbar gare che den do go yoresina jerang kan char phuk jangsum la pimbar do go yobare so char de yang je lober ke che da sosola yi me dewa da tela so ba dunga kang yo ba yin ya me gewhini de la ya yo tek che sem ke mi 간터 생고 돈다 롭솔라서 받는다 제 비드 대차용 거 바로와 차트 되니 폭라 다지 가서서는 다나 다 폭세주텔라 고아니도 찍된지 딘딘한 게 메친데 난다 뭐 야랍 잔주 진제 뭐인라 핀통긴제 용도 명 희반데야 되니 소소 야 찰롱 중사게 되니 다 기비시니당 대스 탐질라 시위라레 그요바레 땡문에다 내리다 alright 되니다 되니 포기임바테 카레리스드 tartok sanje ju kompang to bala te tabu ta kulong ta namjun ta roba chingi ro si de roba chi be don ra teni te ta te tabu la tu ta na ba gun che bar sho se yang la ma se char phok jang sun jang si de ta phok ni ba de jang riang chong la ya teni ta
Then come to the 7th chapter, which is the aspiration to encounter and to please the spiritual friends or spiritual teachers. It says, it's verse number 7, may I always associate with spiritual friends who wish to help me and teach the deeds of Samantabhadra. May I never cause them pain or disappointment. So the first line in a Tibetan is, so spiritual friends who wish to help me. So that's how it starts. And so spiritual friends who wish to help me refers to not just our ordinary friends, but those who actually benefit me. And that is basically our spiritual teachers. And they benefit us in different ways. They benefit us in the short term, in the long term, and also in an ultimate absolute sense. In the short term, they help us when we encounter just sudden circumstances in our lives that make us feel unhappy and uneasy in our minds. Then we can talk about that with the teacher, and then the teacher gives us some advice, which is like the medicine for our mind. So that's in the short term. In the long term, it is that in a mundane sense, in this life, the teacher will encourage us in the training of excellent, well-mannered conduct that benefits others. And really benefiting others really depends on such training. And then the ultimate, helping us in the ultimate sense, is that this spiritual friend or teacher also assists us and encourages us on our path to attain enlightenment. So may I always associate with spiritual friends. So these are it's a little different in the Tibetan. So, wait a minute. So may I always associate with spiritual friends who wish to help me and who teach me excellent conduct. I think that's how far we went. I don't need the song. Okay.
Da tene da gebishini de ge tsen da dang jewa sma pardo kantar namba gundo sosola pimba dunkin je dan trepar ho se da gebishini de ta vejilan thene tene da tsikan di woma de ge gare yiba de ge de da ke namye yi myon son tan de gare son sidu yi myon siba de sem pam ji ba sem jo meji ba tene de sola tu da namba gun rani ke guyab ji ba tene kurta ji ba chuba ji ba ta de tamje cha de yore ande ngarang su namjun ge hini tin tang ke tone mambu sung ke yore tene de ndu da ge hini la te ta hyu je kare chi ne chin do gore serdu da ge hini la 제고아데 까딩게 차네 작아 요래 까딩게 차네 졸 지와 스마 시베 맥나오데야 생긴데 게비히니 차다 요래 남중 아란 속에 파마라 파마까딘 딩고레 파마라 그yap지 고레 손레 대야 잠보주 바레 파마라 그yap고한데 파메 아란 속간데 디 따라 루진도 마출 루치 빠른지 불루데 Tana Tsermagic so na yang so mucho. Ngala Tsermagic so mucho samsan ro jing do nga tsando. Dendra ke tsa chimbo glunde sok tere. Pama ke nangwarwa. Di jimse ne pama la. Deni kadinting gowa, kuyapchi gowa. Dere. Deni gegin chirtang ka kulobe gegin. Tana churang la ta tana zomen gongda di chi churang la sekje saken tongke longkin sunju. 인지 이너에 게해 강다 가야자 두스 가딩 문에 딩고 요래 절단 남중 알아 저거 미 가딩 딩고 지대 같이 뭐 가딩 때게 뭐게 머니 요나 때게 델람다고 삼바다고 주는 뭐 내면에 등에 삼는 가딩 딩미린 토드라서 대면 참참 제 소수 삼노던 퇴면 제 컨트롤 사야 당 라면만 뭐대 주초 뭐 주초나 이제 용거를 와대 이 용찬나야 드린 타지의 때르지 센타로 지네 진들란도 체문도와데 아 잡디히네 오 대강알 드니까 den치 뭐 장소 드니까 den치 뭐 장소 드인데 디라잉게 디 삼바나오 nga랑 저 파스 삼바 저 딜 삼바데르다 로사카 삼바나오 딜람 조진나오 제 데데 딘timbo 휴차나도와 데 차즈데 데 갈라제 소소 그 논터도 좀 물린지야 소 레라고 차는 거 요래 소소 너요나 데 파스 데이터 인자 나랑서 간달 주초는 내니 종데 데니 지기지로 그야고 지때 같이 모려와 그야때 용화때 가딘 삼히기 도는 용거도
then these were the first 3 lines, which is this first sentence in English. So may I always associate, so this always is kind of in the end in a Tibetan sentence, so it means that at all times, the always here also refers to not only in this life, but in this life, in the bardo and in future lives, at all times. May I associate with someone who wishes to help me, and so on. And then the last line says, may I never cause them pain or disappointment. So may I never disappoint them, may I never make them sad. May I always respect them. And, regard them highly, hold them in great esteem. There's many different ways how we should follow a spiritual teacher. And the reason why we have to do all these things of venerating and respecting and so on is because when we do that, we remember their kindness. So it actually, respect really comes from gratitude. The teacher is the one who has opened our eyes to all future lives. So he's very kind to us. Then also we always say we have to remember the kindness of our parents, and therefore we respect them. If we think of them with gratitude, we will also respect them. And if we respect them, our conduct will be excellent. We are grateful to our parents because they gave us this body that we treasure so much. The body is so precious to us. We don't want to inflict any harm on this body. We even think that you must not prick me with a thorn because it will hurt my precious body. And so who gave you this precious body? It's your parents. So if you remember their kindness, respect for them will arise. And then the same goes for your teachers. Could be school teachers, or someone, a language teacher, for example, even if they just teach you a single word in a different language, like English or any other language, it's incredible. So we have to remember their kindness too. And that's also important, actually, just when people relate to each other. It's important to remember each other's kindness. And because, for example, if two people have a relationship, I really believe that the determining factor, what determines that whether or not this relationship is going to last at all for a long time, it depends on whether or not those people are able to remember each other's kindness and feel grateful for one another. So, of course, sometimes, since this is a normal human society, a community, it always happens that sometimes we get into a fight and we get angry at each other and we don't agree. But this is not the point. Even if we don't agree, what really keeps a connection alive and up is to remember somebody else's kindness. So, for example, you would think that just in order to sustain this relationship, I'm going to remember that person with kindness, feel grateful for them. So basically, such gratitude becomes like the bridge that facilitates kind of safe passage or connection and stable connection. So if we have a sense of gratitude, then it will become quite easy actually to accept each other's mistakes and differences. So since we are all living in this society, that's really important to remember that we really respect each other. And again, this respect comes from remembering the kindness of feeling grateful for others.
다데인데 라마 게비시니도 소라 데네 지와는 체랍 군든 treparhyo simula jage yore digaps zambojob molana네 다데 ngene 데 진 게비시니 sonda 게비시니 세버jo들 tre야 데 갑레 카보 요데오 바로와 데네 다 게비시니 데라양 투주 장바데 닌제 소소 그 주로 당 소소 그 로마 탐지 그 동할 그 셀만라오데 양 돈도 그 쌈노데 데 마이 데리 데 메나 데네 인다 용딘 탐지 그 대점 그양 핀토도 그 요말 단직딘데네 희와냥일인데 뭐 고방도 고요나 지딘데 그양 또그 당선 탐지라 양 핀다 처제 요러와 다 대근 추그 돈의 현재做的 상제제 민도 做的 상제 권방라 고주 데르와 다 희강은 휴바나 이 룩자다베 이나리 자워다베 이나리 데니 데인데 게비히니 데타베지 요반 데라 데니 나랑서 남준 체 까보 체나양 데게제 뇌네제 추 단테솔라제 냠도 롱스 주주 요반도서 소남데 kalle khapon ro cha de yore tele chi mambo the ro yore andal de chi login te na ngaran so kha yo mari sisa yore kare sina leri sir chorba cho yin hin de na cho yin hin de kain sena cheni ten ta teri kanar ten tana inza ten lama gyo shini de ni ba sum ji go ne ni par si go so nipa sumde tene drupa goni nipar sipa drupa nyamni la sopa tanda thone goni nipar sipa tene lunga goni tene nipar sipa ta lunga goni nipar sipa sipa de luju goni te namji suso gachi lama la kurta kuya ta charo sipa la sopa de chaga yore charo ropa sipa tene 다 나가 거네나 데 딱 가래이나야 데네 휴야요 데 바라와 다 나가 거네 로바 망보지야요라 샵서 데네 산생 거네 시바시다 라만 사주 동주 곤주 데르소바 토네양 데네 라마니 버시바 세나다 데레 데네 라마니 버시바 게비히니 버시바데 ngaran so lam namjor namjun donho yore da lam namjor de kar chimbo hyu cha da yore lam namjor de ngaran so 그 chugu gomang thya de ngaran so ngundu re ngundu do ba so chugu dorjin chang se ba de ni susu gebhini de cha de yo ba ro da de endu tara ngaran so laman chuba sen dan don de ni 다 소소 gebhini de cha de yore se de soso le ta de 그 number 20 chad yorsina nor wada te sa sam nor tsumare tena nori te susu tsabla te susu ke sem trin hi te dang rikpa sena rikpa kun zangbo senare ta te ni teni jigba chad yorwa ten jigba cha te so ha kon teni ta hyapto hya so le labo chag yores.
So in this prayer we say, may I always meet with spiritual friends in all my lifetimes. So in general, so it is said that the condition that we need is the spiritual teacher. And first of all, it's very difficult to even encounter such a teacher. And then that teacher also must be not any teacher, but it must be someone who has the foundation of love and compassion and really has the wish to take out the thorn that causes suffering to the sentient beings, to the disciples, the Dharma friends. So that's the foundation. And if that foundation is lacking, then one cannot really bring so much benefit to others, meaning that one cannot actually establish them or bring them to the state of nirvana, of liberation. Maybe in a worldly sense, one can bring them some benefit, but now since here we are speaking from the perspective of the Dharma, the perspective of the Dharma is the point of the Dharma is to attain the state of enlightenment. Awakening is the point of the Dharma. And we have mentioned before, there is different kind of motivations for that, of bodhichitta, like the shepherd-like and the king-like and so on. But so in any case, it is very difficult to encounter such a spiritual teacher in the first place. And even if we have encountered such a perfect teacher, it's extremely difficult to have the merit to be able to be close to that teacher and to enjoy the closeness of Dharma teachings and so on from that teacher. And of course, not everyone has the same situation. Often we are not able to do that because we run into different circumstances, and that's of course we can't help that. But in any case, it is a great fortune if we are able to serve the guru, because that is really rare. And it is said that there is 3 ways of serving the guru or pleasing the guru. The first one is to serve the guru through one's own practice, so to engage in practice. And the second one is to serve the guru with body and speech, which is, for example, with one's body, one's conduct is respectful toward the guru, or one is doing physical things that help the guru. And then with one's speech, one can use one's speech in various different ways to serve the guru. And then the third way of serving the guru is through material things. So for example, that means caretaking the guru by serving the guru food and drink and clothing and so on. We practice the Guru Yoga practice or the Lama Tripa practice, which is actually a very important practice. So it says in there that the main purpose of the practice is to attain the state of the Dharmakaya. And in this practice, it is the Dharmakaya Vajradharam who is inseparable from the spiritual teacher, the root guru. So when we are reciting the Lama Tripa practice, then therefore if we think that they're all separate, maybe there's the spiritual teacher and myself and so on, that is actually also mistaken, because ultimately really your own mind and the guru's mind or awareness and that of Samantabhadra are all one and the same. And so therefore, if you serve the guru, actually it becomes like of one mind.
Tati o de Ravi Jepa de te yin hik pa sum de jurbugon mumba shiba de Sanje se jo kurung gombo na sum ta de da jarwa ta mang karpa kun de majower de da la yan chupa jachir jesan. Ta di tsikang tambo de ke karetin sen ta sanje hiba de kujang ta yog dewa mayin bara. De la tin course jancho sumba nin tu la so ba ke ta sewa chapja wen kor de ba. Tene teso la sum ta de da jarwa ta song. Teso ta sum de jarwa jarho sta monglang te jang ko yore. Sum de ta na dara gang le kyuba na yin. Susu tsawe lama de susu rangyi ke sem ke di rangyi jinrik lama da kare laro ngarang tsuku jingpa de rikpa de lama thok cha da yorwa jinrik lama thok tenrabe di ta de tawe dara ngarang tsu tambo yaka la tsawe lama je ta oti chi nga tsawe lama re yes samsang ro samno je khorde ta ngarang tsu nam ju samno ten ro yorwa chi nga tsawe lama re yes te la ta tsawe lama te la tene te soso ke sem la yi gom we ne ma yi la che gom do de tsawe lama te ta tambo che lama te ke kwe ju pa ta na hyar ke mo ye tang sun ju ni tene te ta so mi la le hya ke tene sem la na ma ko yin ze pa kong ke ze ze mo ze tang sim ra ta chama te tene sem la hyar ji ne tene kamur sung tang ta te kapsu chirtang ta loma ngene ya tenda ina je deba de so ya che thombo rao de so nyamni ji dang ya bo hi do yo na teni kazang gong lu ba na yin lamen je ju gare ina ya dangwa la cher cher de ko yo wa ta so so de ta ne ba de mi na teni lama ke je lecture ko so de las mi ba de go yo lecture ke lama la ta lecture ke so la te yu tse te lecture de so te ten so so sen la ting par sin rem ji te teni ta lama de len yong ma ne teni so so sem la che yin da man ra wa ga ha chang si bo che lama de ge gu lu yong su zo ba gu lu za da ra bo gu lu da wa sang da yong su zo ba pa re nam ju par da ba la chang si wa che ta na ji khar ta ba yong go yo re ta ta ji khar ta ba yi jong za du teni ta te la yang che gom pa ngang ke seng ne ya che gom ro du teni ngone ta so so ke di sem ke rikpa ke ta ngone sem ke rikpa nde ta lama se ju teni che mi de ba che ta che ya na ma par ke de gong go yo ro te ya na parang yin ta kare cha ge re ta lama se na sanje se na lama gebhi ta su tsaw lama de hyo yor da sanje se na tsaw lama chi ri kha tsaw lama se na sanje de ri kha teni samne teni sem ko ko sem ko ngusam song da ngusam da ge jar wa teni sem ko ngusam da pa ngusa teni ta ji ta ba ta te ta be yong go yo ba res.
And next is the 8th chapter, which is the aspiration to actualize or be in the actual presence of the Buddhas, the Tathagatas, or here's the Sugatas. And so it is verse number 8 in the Blue Prayer Book, page 55. May I always personally behold the victorious Buddhas, those guardians surrounded by bodhisattvas, without tiring in all future aeons. May I always present them magnificent offerings. So first, it begins with those who are surrounded, those guardians surrounded by bodhisattvas, guardians here referring to the Buddha. And so surrounded, it is also mentioned because the Buddha doesn't sit there all by himself, but the Buddha is surrounded by a retinue of really millions and limitless bodhisattvas and arhats, shravakas, and so forth. And then the next line says, so may I directly behold, so may I always directly behold the victorious Buddhas, those guardians surrounded by bodhisattvas. And so as you mentioned before, the root guru's mind and the nature of your own mind is indivisible. So your own awareness and your own clear awareness and the guru's mind are one and the same. And so when we practice the guru, we bring the guru to mind, thinking that this is my root guru, you are my root guru. And then you think of that root guru and all of those things about him. So you think, for example, like the things that he does with his body and the way he speaks to others, the way he smiles and jokes and so on. All of those things should appear in your mind. And so if you're someone who really has great high level of devotion to the guru and you know how to practice well, then as you mentioned previously already, that then no matter what the guru does, all the activities of the guru, you will be able to see them all as teachings or instructions. But even if you're not at that level of practice, you can just think about the good qualities of the guru. So, and gradually that develops. So, then when you have habituated to that, and because of really always thinking of the guru that appears in your mind then his form appears with extreme clarity, that is more clear than usual, like a kind of a very unique kind of clarity. For example, it's more clear than a photograph and so on. So this is how the guru eventually appears and should appear in your mind. And then that has to be habituated when it appears until you really actualize that your own awareness and the guru's mind are really not separate at all. So until then, you practice and you habituate. So you recognize then finally that the root guru is the Buddha, and the Buddha is the root guru. And therefore, by seeing the root guru, you are directly beholding the Buddha. So that is what is meant here. May I always personally or directly behold the Buddhas.
산지지 샤른지다 문지 세와데 소수자라마데 산지니 더 하고마 데리 타토나 타텐라지나 다나 간다 용주 요르스나 베나 집세 말아레바게 콩타 포캄포 제는 요 잡라레 까포지마도 중야요 마레 칼라타 사마자 자사야요 마레와테니 데 살로마탄다노 진추니 요데데 ngala o nga jabl tu lo juya mado song khong hyum khyo mare ngala sama saya mado se hyum khyo mare khong gare sem hyum lama tusum sanje de yi dongye wa tan dar du mi son ne tene ta lama ten khong lo tusum sanje ta lama si ta marpa hyo yor wa lama tusum sanje des 마바데 두섬지 산지리 송거르데데 산지직 직보 말이스 두섬지 산지 이 동해와 콩기 이데다 데 딘사든데 라잉거 이라다 동해와 히와 동히와다 제단 제오케스 책지르와 데네 나면 라드미스 다텔 나면 라암도 손네 데네 콩 물라레바다 로든치 자치 생로고 요레 다라운데네 베다 그랑 뿌응을렌도베네 데 응건도 요레 부고 충청 응바나 용어요로와 다 된다지 용텀네 다 말아레바시 바데 제지 루제 상제송 다 나랑 소양데네 두섬지 상제 담진지 da miji shibade sosu tsab lama de tusumji sanjini da ha go mao de ha go ne ha go tsam la yang ha jang ke samji machaba ge nyam to zena deri samji machaba ge ta nyamni sena de cha do ta de jun sen ne ya yong de ta sini soso rang rik pa de ni tamayem tsab lama de cha do yo ba ta da mala re bak sun ya na da goji chenbo yire 동에 와는 라드미 송더라 라드미 순제테 샘지 릭바데 두섬 산지 중어버 주베 라마 자발라마 마파로자 대하랑 임바 따테고 고고 요르티네 다 말라레 바게 테 고아테 건 상제 송라이데 건 상제로 대하고 ngazo data maonen khoan la de bar ta ngazo sina yang khaye ha kon sangje sin de ba mangbo jurung ne ran ta janjo su balas de nga ta we na ta ta res ha no mao na de la de ba je cha de yore ha ko ya ke rewa chimbo yo
So beholding or seeing the Buddha directly depends on actually whether or not one is able to see that one's root guru is the Buddha. So if you see the root guru as the Buddha, you are seeing the Buddha. For example, Milarepa spent his life in an empty cave. All he had on his body was a white cotton cloth, and he had no food to eat, some nettles sometimes. But he didn't lose heart, and he didn't feel all depressed, thinking, I do not have clothing, I do not have food, and so on. But when he felt sad, that is when he remembered the Guru. And so there is the song where he says, remembering the kind Guru, speaking about Marpa, within whom the Buddhas of the three times are complete, brings great sadness to my mind. And so this sadness is not a negative sadness, but it's a sadness that comes from his love for the Guru. And so even though I remember the Guru with sadness, I actually am never separated from the Guru. So actually, when I remember the Guru with sadness, I'm never separated from the Guru. So that was a time when Milarepa was quite old already, like 70, 80 years old. But when he sang that song, he was actually crying like a little child. So this is what happens. If that can happen, then one attains enlightenment. For example, Milarepa attained enlightenment in a single lifetime, a single body. And so likewise for us, if whether or not we actually encounter all the Buddhas of the three times depends on whether or not we are able to see the root Guru as the actual Buddha. And actually even just to know that in itself is an incredible realization and an incredible practice. And that practice has to be sustained continuously until your awareness becomes really, is realized to be one with the Guru's mind. So one line here of in Milarepa's quote is very meaningful, that we should understand, is that I am never separated from the Guru. So he had realized that when he realized his mind, that's when he realized that this mind is the essence of all the Buddhas of the three times, and that itself is Marpa, who embodies all those Buddhas of the three times. And understanding that, realizing that, Milarepa attained enlightenment. And us, on the other hand, it's because we have not realized that we are still left behind in samsara. So just speaking for myself, there surely are some who do see the root Guru as a Buddha. There are those bodhisattvas who see that. Just speaking for myself, I'm not like that. Maybe I have not completely understood that point, and therefore I'm left behind in samsara. However, I do have great hopes of realizing that.
다 대다 산제다 장초 선바 드니 세와 스타자드나 요데바데 이중운성 근자르시 다데 응엔데 해종저 효과인데 잉우스 이중운성 세더라 이 이중운성 히바데 매근운성 되는라고 요말에 매근운성 암초 나부운성 나운성 세드송운성 드송운성 임발라 요렇게 나반다오를 마도 그 요르 짐바데 천 자야 그 코르네 봐요 말에 되니 이 데라 니요레 이 중은 섬제다 또 빠지니 또 버차데 되니 추시인데 제 남도 또 반다오레 다코 추시 글로이레 남도 또 바레 다 때말이야 냠도 또 바말 대대게 또바데 추시리 간서 코게 베나 델 잠촌은 냐요 사리 상상로 코 주바 장장 제게 반로 로제 요레디 주바 징킹 그 로제 요레 참레 그 되게 요레 잠촌은 냐요 요레 참는 미사 차도 요레 다 이중운섬 히바데 공운섬 거 라움라더니 다디 다랑가란 소리 때 운섬 참원라고 지 차데 요르바 띵띵운섬데 야 남판르데 띵 다라 산제지 공판 터운데 다라데 산제라 팍팍 그 람터운데 텔라 남절운섬 세레 남절운섬 때야 팍팍 남절운섬 남절바 그 운섬 잘봐 남절운섬 때 야남 파르네 야체 짜르존데 되니 남친 그 이시시 바다 차노 이시 데 말라레 박송 남시 만통 이신 통세완데 다 통통스나 간다 코랑 그 되게 이 다라데 넘버 히바디 이치바 네임포스 말아 네임포스 다 네임포스 안다오지 효과요레다데 간다르제 동구 토라양 데 이시차도 요르라 코알이 요버가스 남시 마도 nga준 통도요 말아 남시 나이요 레가체 요라 다티 간다르티 이중은 섬데게 되니 통용바데 땅오네 되니 무요 딤바나오제 딘 돈담 딤바리스 돈담 딤바
So may I always directly behold the victorious Buddha. So millions and billions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, may I always directly behold them. This term, directly beholding here, it does not here refer to seeing something directly with one's eyes. So, or hearing something directly with one's ears. It's not a direct sense perception of a physical form, the physical form of an object or something like that. It's nothing like that. It is a direct beholding with the mind, a direct seeing with the mind. And there are two kinds of seeing with the mind. One is the direct seeing of the mind, and the other one is the conceptual seeing with the mind. And this conceptual seeing with the mind is more the basis for confusion, because it is mainly based on inference. That is, for example, you're looking at the ocean, at the sea, and you're thinking, there must be some fish in there. So you're just guessing that there are fish. You don't actually see fish, but because there's water, you think there must be fish. But there might be fish, but there also might be no fish. So it's the conceptual seeing in the mind is therefore basis of confusion. And then there is the direct perception with the mind, which is a much more subtle perception, which is very much more direct. And it increases. So the subtle perception of the mind increases, and one enters the path of the noble ones. And so then this subtle direct perception turns into what is called the yogic perception. And then when the yogic perception increases further, it develops into omniscient wisdom. Milarepa also had said, I do not see consciousness, I only see wisdom. So that is because his ordinary consciousness has been transformed into wisdom mind. So that's the ultimate mind, this primordial wisdom or primordial awareness. The consciousness here refers to the samsaric state of mind that thinks and engages in various activities. So that becomes transformed through direct seeing. So when it becomes transformed through direct seeing with the mind, then it turns into the ultimate wisdom, which is the seeing of the ultimate truth.
Tati tsigang oma ni de ke maung karba kund majowa de da la yang chuba jachir je sa tati sanje da chancho samba tamji yi ji ngun song ke lamir salen jar yung wan de sola dan chuban be serendo bande ya de ni chuban be na de yin la dun ba da chang yong ge yor de na ya chuban be ne de ni chu jung ko lo ko ga so ga de ni chu nin ba la majowa de ni 단데 몰란데 돈도 튼바라 다 나란서는 다 추니니니 그러니까 된 참자 탕제 갈래 가와데 참아라 용 만벌 용코 요래 데 데이터와 마용효 세 되니 되게 추신기 나리 닌기 나리 되니 저당당 코는 들아 요르바 다 추니네 그바 가레레세데 소수추디 니네 이나 핀다야 데르바 대인잔 되니 간터 대소라 주반바와 당 냥이나 만다바 소완다바 당 다네 델소바게 된 소소게 협도르바 다냐 나야 조아메지 호 센데네 몰란자다 몰란트나 내가 니도와 담보 샤른 자르고 몰라 무섬도 샤른 자르고 몰라 되니 샤른 자르네 다 대소르 저도고 소소 근간에 되니 조아메바 대양 깔바네 깔바바도 조아메바 그도네 대답이 협도 용효스
And then the last two lines in that verse say, without tiring in all future aeons, may I always present them magnificent offerings. So first we have directly encountered, so seen directly with the mind, all these Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. And then since we now see them, then we make offerings to them, which refers to the 7 branches altogether. And specifically, we ask them to turn the wheel of Dharma. So then we listen to the Dharma. And this term here, without tiring, also means that may I listen to the Dharma without tiring. And this really does happen in reality sometimes to us. Often when we listen to a lot of Dharma, then we just get a little bit tired of it. It happens a lot. So now here we are making a prayer, may that not happen. May I not grow tired from listening to the Dharma. And of course, this is samsara, and it refers to both those who teach the Dharma and those who listen to the Dharma. May I do that tirelessly. Because what's the purpose of listening to the Dharma? The purpose is to benefit others. And so this is a prayer where we pray that tirelessly, may I tirelessly serve those Buddhas and the Guru, and may tirelessly supplicate them to not pass into nirvana. May I never give up in giving my service and so forth. May I not grow tired. So tirelessly may I give service. So this verse consists of these 2 parts. First, the prayer to directly encounter, see them, which is the seeing with the mind. And then when we see them, once we have seen them, then we pray that may I serve them tirelessly, and not just that, tirelessly for many aeons.
Thank you very much.
Let me do dedication prayer. Wait a minute. Page 11 and 16 in the yellow prayer book. By this merit may I attain omniscience, having defeated the enemies my wrongdoings. May I liberate all beings who are tossed in the ocean of samsara by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. On page 16. Just as the hero Manjushri realized things as they are, and as did Samantabhadra too, I will follow in their path and perfectly dedicate all these virtues. And then in the blue prayer book, page 64, verse number 21. May every being ailing with disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed.